Welcome back. If you've been on Twitter, the best place for discussions on complex topics, then you probably heard about Dream Stands. The stands of the Minecraft YouTuber Dream. They're known for things like cancel culture, performative activism, doxing, death threats, etc, etc. Their infamy is well known across the Minecraft fandom, and Dream himself has responded to his stands with a video in December of 2020. However, his response and arguments is, well, complicated, and today I'll be talking about his arguments in that video. Dream's 8-minute long video puts into perspective his thoughts on stand culture. I won't play the entire video, but I will play certain highlights that show his main arguments.
So, there's a few things that stands are generally known for. They usually have their profile picture as a picture of their favorite creator, their social media names might involve that creator, and they generally tweet a lot or keep close update on what their favorite creators are doing. Now, a lot of people use this to say that stands are obsessive and that it's gross or stalker behavior. And I mean, of course, there's a small subset of actual stalker fans that do things that I wouldn't like or that are creepy, but that's not stands as a whole. The group of people that call themselves Dream Stands, or stands of any creator, are just extremely enthusiastic fans.
This is Dream's first and arguably main argument, that the definition of the word stan means an extremely enthusiastic fan. Now, this is very important, as his definition of the word stan is going to influence his other arguments in the rest of the video.
I understand how somebody that isn't a creator might feel creepy if someone does this to them, like if they had a profile picture with your face on it or something. But to a creator, it's no different to a celebrity or a football player or any popular figure. I'm a big football fan, and when I was younger, I had posters, I had shoes, I had jerseys of my favorite players. I watched all the behind the scenes videos, I watched all their games. My profile picture on Twitter was my favorite player waving the flag of my favorite team. And I looked up to a lot of players, but does it sound familiar? That's almost exactly what stands are to me, or to another creator.
This is Dream's second argument, and it complements his first argument. He argues that his stands are no different than football fans. The use of their faces as profile pictures, their obsessiveness, their tendency to form groups of like-minded fans. This piggybacks on his first argument with his own definition of stan culture.
But obviously, there's some fans that take it way too far. That's definitely true, but it's a very, very small amount. And you usually have to go looking for them if you want to find them. But there's actually way more haters that take it too far, and usually in a much, much worse way. I've had people try and find my address, spam my comment section, send me death threats, and so much more, but not from stans, just from people who really, really don't like me. At this point, I see 1,000 times more comments about how terrible Dream Stands are than I see Dream Stands, like in general, like just in comment sections. Like I see not even just toxic Dream Stands, but Dream Stands in general.
This is Dream's third and actually fourth argument. He argues that any toxic Dream Stands are just a minority in his fan base, and that the majority of his stands are positive. He also argues that it is really his toxic haters that drive the toxicity online in his name, and not his stans.
I don't agree with everything my fans do, obviously. And if they overstep boundaries, I tell them. I tell them that I didn't like what they did. I tell them it made me uncomfortable. And you can see that on my Twitter as recently as a few days ago. But when I tell them, they stop because they genuinely care about me and look up to me, and why would they want to make me upset?
This is Dream's fifth argument, that he's able to influence the behavior of his stans when they do something wrong. So these are Dream's 5 arguments: that the word stan really means an extremely enthusiastic fan, that football fans are no different than Dream stans, that only a minority of his fans are really toxic, that Dream haters are the ones that really drive the toxicity in his name, and that Dream has enough influence over his fans that he can tell them to stop when they do something wrong. And so I'll respond to Dream's 5 arguments. Dream's main argument is pretty much the biggest flaw in his video. He defines the word stan as an extremely enthusiastic fan, and with it carries a positive connotation. However, the etymology of the word stan is anything but positive. The word comes from an NMM song called Stan, where a super obsessed fan becomes obsessive to the point where he drives off a bridge with his pregnant girlfriend. The song was essentially a warning on what could happen when someone becomes too obsessed with their idols. Now, the general consensus of the word stan is of a negative connotation, someone who becomes too obsessed with their favorite creators. When stan culture is used to describe other fandoms, such as K-pop stans, it is also used in a negative way. When people talk about K-pop stans, they typically talk about the negative aspects of it, like cancel culture and death threats, things that are pretty similar to Dream stans. When Dream redefined the word stan for his video to something positive, it kinda sets up the rest of his video to avoid talking about the negative aspects of his fanbase. Dream points out how the enthusiasm of football fans is really no different than the enthusiasm his stans have. However, he never really points out any of the negative characteristics of his stans, things like death threats, NSFW artworks, doxing, all that stuff. I haven't really seen any football fans doing this, and while it probably has happened, it isn't really as noticeable as Dream stans. And this does go back to Dream redefining the word stan, because when he redefined that word, it set him up so that he can avoid talking about the negative aspects of his fanbase. Dream also argues that only a small percentage of his stans are toxic. While this is true, because of how large his fanbase is, these toxic stans still number in the thousands. Dream has over 24 million subscribers. If just 1% of them are toxic, that's still 240,000 stans. That amount of toxic people on the internet is simply not unnoticeable. If we look at a smaller number, like the amount of Twitter followers he still has about 4 million followers. If just 1% of them are toxic stans, that's still 40,000 stans, which is way more than enough to get something trending on Twitter. Dream's fanbase is just so large that even a tiny percent of his fans are still numerous, to the point that his toxic stans and their actions simply cannot be ignored. Dream points out about his haters. He argues that his haters are the ones who are driving the toxicity in his fanbase. Dream haters exist, and their presence is just as bad as toxic stans, but it doesn't mean that the toxic stans don't exist. For example, in K-pop haters exist, and they can be quite as toxic as the stans, but it doesn't mean that the stans don't exist, and they kinda coexist in an unfortunate way. The same goes with the Dream fanbase. Dream haters exist, and they can also be toxic, and they can also engage in actions like doxing and death threats. But the fact that Dream haters exist does not negate the existence of Dream stans, who also engage in behaviors such as doxing and death threats. Those two can coexist, unfortunately, and they can both be very, very toxic. Dream's final argument is that he is able to tell his fans to stop when they go too far. However, the effectiveness of him telling his fans to stop is quite questionable. Dream has told his fans to stop drawing NSFW art of many of his friends, like TommyInnit, and it still happens. Dream has told his fans over and over to stop sending death threats to people, and yet it continues to happen. It doesn't really help that when Dream talks about the bad things that happen in his fanbase, he tends to not directly disavow the action. And when he does do it, he tends to do it on his private alt account, and not on his main Twitter. Overall, Dream and his fanbase have endured a lot of scrutiny ever since his explosive growth of his channel. Dream stans are not the only examples of toxic stans, but it is unique on how other YouTubers don't really experience the same problems. Mr. Beast, for example, has almost 3 times the amount of subscribers than Dream, and yet he doesn't have toxic stans. Dream has talked about how he studied the YouTube algorithm and planned out his strategy to get millions of views, but in his endeavor to get millions of subscribers in such a short amount of time, he forgot to consider the responsibility of holding such a large fanbase. Other YouTubers like Mr. Beast, PewDiePie, and DanTDM grew their channels at a much slower pace, and that gave them the opportunity to learn how to manage such a large following that Dream did not have. Dream is unlikely to stop growing anytime soon, but I do hope that as he becomes familiar with the position he is in, that he will do a better job at dealing with his infamous fanbase. That said, this is all that I have to say. If you liked this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.